empires do not always fall to invading armies. Some collapse under the weight of their own contradictions, leaving behind a silence that reshapes history for generations. In the early 18th century, the Indian subcontinent entered such a moment of irreversible transformation. For more than 700 years, Muslim political authority had dominated vast stretches of South Asia, shaping its administration, culture, economy, and historical imagination. Yet in 1707, with the death of Emperor Aurangzeb, this long-established order began to unravel. As historians Aisha Jalal and Sugata Bose observe in modern South Asia, Aurangzeb's death is conventionally regarded as the dividing line between the era of the Great Mughals and that of the Lesser Mughals. Although Aurangzeb had expanded the Mughal Empire to its greatest territorial extent, his prolonged reign and costly military campaigns severely undermined imperial finances and weakened administrative cohesion. The empire he left behind was territorially vast, but politically fragile. Continuous warfare strained the agrarian system, while the central authority in Delhi struggled to assert control over distant provinces. Agrarian revolts by the Marathas, Sikhs, Jats, and other groups steadily eroded Mughal dominance, and ambitious provincial governors increasingly ruled their territories with little regard for imperial command. By the first half of the 18th century, the Mughal throne, once the unchallenged symbol of Muslim political unity, stood fragmented and vulnerable. This was not merely the decline of a dynasty, it marked the beginning of the end of Muslim sovereignty in India. I am Laiba Khan, and in this Crash CSS Pakistan Affairs series, we will trace how this political collapse reshaped Muslim identity, memory, and aspirations, and how the loss of power ultimately generated a far-reaching intellectual and political renaissance in South Asia. The weakening of Mughal authority did not produce a vacuum for long. It produced competitors. By the mid-18th century, the subcontinent was no longer governed by a single imperial center, but fragmented into multiple regional powers, asserting control over former Mughal territories. In Bengal and Bihar, European trading companies, most notably the British East India Company, capitalized on internal court rivalries and forged alliances with local elites to undermine Muslim nawabs. These commercial entities were no longer mere traders. They were rapidly transforming into political actors with military ambitions. In central India, the Marathas expanded aggressively, exploiting Mughal weakness to establish dominance over vast regions. Their rise fundamentally altered the balance of power and further eroded Muslim political control. In the northwest, the Sikh Confederacy asserted autonomy, challenging Mughal authority through both military organization and regional consolidation. Meanwhile, in the south, the kingdoms of Hyderabad and Mysore emerged as significant political entities that no longer recognized Mughal supremacy in any meaningful sense. As Aisha Jalal and Sugata Bose note, the decline of traditional Mughal capitals such as Delhi and Agra was accompanied by the rise of new regional capitals, including Lucknow, Hyderabad, various Maratha cities, and Seringapatam. This transformation marked a shift from imperial unity to a patchwork of successor regimes. This era was not merely one of decline, it was one of redistribution of power. Yet for Muslims, the fragmentation of authority meant the irreversible weakening of a political order they had long dominated. As this Crash CSS documentary emphasizes, understanding these regional transitions is essential for grasping how colonial forces later consolidated control over India. The gradual erosion of Muslim political power reached a decisive turning point with the advance of British colonial authority. The British East India Company achieved its most critical breakthroughs at the battles of Plassey in 1757 and Buxar in 1764. These victories were not simply military successes. They represented a fundamental shift in sovereignty. By securing control over Bengal's revenue system, the company established the financial foundation for its expansion across India. Often aided by local conspirators and disaffected elites, British forces systematically dismantled the authority of established Muslim rulers. Over time, company rule expanded beyond Bengal, absorbing large parts of the subcontinent into a colonial framework that prioritized revenue extraction and administrative control. This process culminated in the Revolt of 1857, a widespread uprising that represented the last major attempt to restore indigenous rule. Its failure had profound consequences. In 1858, the British Crown formally abolished the Mughal dynasty, deposed the last emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar, and assumed direct control over India. Delhi, once the heart of Muslim imperial power, lost all political significance. For the first time in centuries, Muslims ceased to rule anywhere in South Asia. The Mughal Sultanate, which had begun in Delhi over 700 years earlier, came to a definitive end. This was not merely the fall of a ruling house, it was a psychological rupture. A community that had long considered itself the political elite now found itself governed by a foreign Christian power. This moment would profoundly shape Muslim responses to colonial rule, a theme central to this crash CSS academic exploration. Under British rule, the social and political status of Muslims underwent a dramatic transformation. The old Muslim aristocracy and nobility were systematically stripped of authority, privileges, and administrative influence. Colonial economic and bureaucratic structures favored new social classes, particularly a rising Hindu merchant class and Western-educated elites who increasingly dominated public life. For Muslims accustomed to political dominance, this displacement was deeply unsettling. Yet the impact of colonial conquest on ordinary Muslims was complex and varied across regions. As Farzana Shaikh explains, quoting the Bengal scholar Rafiquddin Ahmad, British rule did not harm Muslim peasants in Bengal more than Hindu peasants in material terms. However, it left among Muslims a distinct sense of deprivation that was uncommon among Hindus. This sense arose from the perception that the British had wrested power from them, reinforcing the belief that Muslims descended from ancestors who had once ruled India. Colonial rule thus became psychologically associated, particularly for northern Muslim elites, with the overthrow of a glorious Muslim past. This new reality forced Muslims to confront their status as a minority community. Educated Muslim leaders responded by reaffirming a distinctive Muslim qawm, or community, with a claim to special historical status. As Sheikh notes, although the Raj compelled Muslims to adopt the position of a mere minority, many resisted any dilution of their historical claim to power. The memory of centuries of Muslim rule became a vital link between past dominance and present subordination. This reconfiguration of identity would lay the groundwork for political mobilization, a process examined throughout this Crash CSS series. The loss of political power compelled Muslims to rethink their collective identity in unprecedented ways. For centuries, Muslim identity in India had been intertwined with governance, law, and sovereignty. Under colonial rule, this association was abruptly severed. As Farzana Shaikh argues, educated Muslim leaders sought to preserve a sense of distinctiveness by emphasizing historical memory. The recollection of Muslim rule served not merely as nostalgia, but as a political resource that bridged the gap between minority status and claims to nationhood. This historical consciousness fueled early political demands. Initially, Muslims sought communal safeguards within the colonial system to protect their social and economic interests. Over time, these demands evolved into calls for full parity with Hindus at the All India level. The belief that Muslims possessed a unique historical mission, grounded in centuries of rule, became central to emerging political arguments. The past was not viewed as closed history, but as evidence of an interrupted destiny. Colonial modernity intensified this process. As Muslims encountered Western political ideas, debates emerged over representation, democracy, and nationalism. Yet these discussions were consistently framed through the lens of historical injustice. The memory of lost sovereignty transformed political grievances into moral claims. This shift marked a crucial stage in the Muslim Renaissance, as identity was reconstructed around both faith and history. As Crash CSS emphasizes, this reimagining of identity is essential for understanding later political developments, including the demand for a separate Muslim homeland. Even before British dominance was firmly established, Muslim thinkers had begun grappling with the implications of Mughal decline. In the 17th and 18th centuries, reformers such as Shah Waliullah of Delhi, born in 1703 and active until 1762, emerged in response to the crisis of Muslim power. As Farzana Shaikh explains in Making Sense of Pakistan, Shah Waliullah's passionate dedication to moral regeneration must be understood primarily as a response to the loss of Muslim authority following the disintegration of the Mughal Empire. His reformist project sought to cleanse what he perceived as corrupt practices and strengthen Muslim institutions to restore communal vitality. Shah Waliullah was not alone. Earlier figures such as Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi in the late 16th and early 17th centuries had emphasized religious revival, while later activists like Syed Ahmad Shahid of Ray Bareilly in the early 19th century pursued the defense of Muslim society through more militant means. Although their methods differed, these figures shared a common objective: preserving Muslim social order in the absence of political power. These efforts demonstrate that the Muslim Renaissance did not begin in the 20th century. It was rooted in earlier responses to decline. Political collapse did not extinguish the idea of Muslim governance as a communal obligation. Instead, scholars sought renewal from within society. This continuity between early revivalist thought and later political movements is a critical theme highlighted throughout this Crash CSS series. After the catastrophe of 1857, Muslim responses to colonial rule took new and varied forms. Among the most influential figures of this period was Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, born in 1817 and active until 1898. A jurist and scholar, Sir Syed believed that Muslim survival depended on adaptation rather than resistance. As Stephen Cohen explains in The Idea of Pakistan, Sir Syed respected and even feared the British, arguing that the only way Muslims could resist Christian missionary influence and Hindu political dominance was through modern education and loyalty to the Raj. In 1875, Sir Syed founded the Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College at Aligarh, later known as Aligarh Muslim University. This institution trained a new Muslim intelligentsia fluent in English, science, and modern administration. Sir Syed's educational programs sought to uplift Muslims from socio-economic backwardness while preserving their distinct identity. Although he did not advocate a separate state, his efforts launched a modernist renaissance that produced the lawyers, teachers, and political leaders of the next generation. Aligarh became more than an educational institution. It became a cultural movement. It reshaped Muslim attitudes toward modernity and colonial power. As this Crash CSS series highlights, Sir Syed's legacy lies not in separatism, but in empowerment through education, laying intellectual foundations that later political movements would build upon. Alongside modernist reform, more conservative responses to colonial rule emerged through religious scholarship. In 1866, the Darul-Uloom Deoband was established to train ulema in a Puritan Sunni Islam. Although differing sharply from Aligarh's approach, Deoband shared the objective of communal preservation. Islamic seminaries sought to protect religious learning and clarify Islamic norms for a community under colonial pressure. Later institutions such as Nadwat-ul-Ulama, founded in Lucknow in 1893, attempted to reconcile traditional scholarship with limited engagement with modern subjects. In the Northwest, Sindh Madrasa in Karachi, established in 1885, and Islamia College Peshawar, founded in 1913, combined modern and traditional curricula. These institutions prevented the collapse of religious scholarship and often became centers of political discourse. Rather than representing regression, these movements reflected strategic choices. Muslims pursued multiple paths to renewal, some embracing modern education, others emphasizing religious continuity. Together, they formed a cultural renaissance that sustained Muslim society during colonial rule. As Crash CSS underscores, these parallel reform efforts demonstrate the diversity of Muslim responses to decline and the resilience of communal institutions. Beyond institutions, a broader intellectual awakening transformed Muslim society. Newspapers and journals in Urdu and English proliferated, debating theology, social reform, and identity. Writers such as Syed Ahmad Khan and Syed Mustafa Kamal promoted scientific reasoning, while scholars like Ashraf Ali Thanwi and Mahmud Hassan Deobandi defended traditional jurisprudence. According to Stephen Cohen, Muslim elites initially focused on rescuing noble families after 1857, but gradually shifted toward mobilizing the masses, recognizing that political power required broader support. This transition from elitism to populism helped forge a collective political consciousness. Literature and poetry played a vital role. Themes of Muslim honor, history, and destiny dominated cultural production. Allama Iqbal, later associated with the Pakistan movement, awakened Muslim self-esteem by recalling past achievements and urging inner renewal. Although not quoted directly here, his influence was profound. Farzana Shaikh describes this intellectual synthesis as a taut mesh of referential commitments that unified Muslims across ethnic and regional lines. The past became a source of legitimacy, and colonial rule was increasingly viewed as a temporary setback. This cultural transformation set the stage for political mobilization, a progression emphasized throughout this Crash CSS series. The culmination of intellectual and cultural revival was political organization. In 1906, the All India Muslim League was founded to represent Muslim interests. Initially focused on minority safeguards, it gradually articulated demands for self-determination. Leaders such as Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Allama Iqbal drew upon historical memory to argue that Muslims constituted a nation defined by religion. The League's Lahore Resolution of 1940, often called the Pakistan Resolution, marked the decisive articulation of this idea. It demanded independent states for Muslims in regions where they formed majorities. Underlying this demand was the belief, identified by Farzana Shaikh, that Muslims' special historical status justified political autonomy. The sense of injustice stemming from the loss of Muslim rule fueled the drive for parity and ultimately sovereignty. In conclusion, the decline of Muslim rule in South Asia was not merely a political event, but a civilizational shock. From Shah Waliullah to Sir Syed, from Deoband to Aligarh, Muslim society responded with reform, renewal, and resilience. As Sheikh notes, moral regeneration was primarily a response to the loss of Muslim power. That response ultimately culminated in the creation of Pakistan. This thus traces a journey from downfall to renaissance, one that reshaped the destiny of Muslims in South Asia. With this, we conclude the first lesson of this series, where we examine the downfall of Muslim rule in the subcontinent and the far-reaching renaissance that emerged from this historical rupture. This foundational lesson sets the stage for understanding the political, intellectual, and ideological developments that will follow in the upcoming parts of the series. Thank you for investing your time in this discussion. If you found this lesson helpful for your CSS, PMS, or university preparation, please support Crash CSS by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with fellow aspirants. Your support enables us to continue delivering structured, exam-relevant content with academic depth. We will build on these ideas in the next lesson of this series, so stay connected, keep revising, and I will see you in the next video.